And it's the same thing too with unhealed trauma. It will touch every avenue of your life.
Yeah.
So when I clear up the trauma for my clients, then all of a sudden they're excelling in the job market, or they're winning that interview that they really wanted, or creating that business now without fear,
Yeah.
right? The
Yeah.
studies show 8 out of 10 people have 8 out of 10 negative fear-based thoughts.
Yeah.
So as a talent agent, when I was working with my models, actors, singers, dancers, and they didn't believe in themselves, why? The original message is, you can't do that. You're from a small town. You'll
It
never
goes
make
back
it.
to
You're going to
that.
look like a fool out there. So all those messages, right, fill who you feel you believe you are. So we have to
Yeah.
clean all that up. So
And it
let's go through
starts with
the
that
top
childhood
10.
trauma.
Now,
I love
yes,
it.
and there are more than 10, by the way, but these are the top 10 that I saw keep showing up. So the first one is if your parents had any addictions. Now, being a drug and alcohol counselor as well, I named 12 addictions that I have seen interfere with that parent-child relationship. So the
I'm
obvious
going to
two
jot
are
these down.
drugs and
Okay.
alcohol. But then there's also sex, meaning you knew your parent was a chronic cheater, but it was you were part of the secret.
Okay.
Porn use, gambling, hoarding, spending, eating, gaming, TV watching,
Mm-hmm.
workaholism, and even social media addiction.
Okay.
And quieting a kid by putting them on a machine versus playing with them and interacting with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate to see that today because we're really building dependency with children on machines. Okay, so the second
That's
one
wild.
is, yeah, the verbal messages. Just like I explained, saying you could never make it in the talent business. Why are you
Yeah.
even going to modeling school? Those slight put downs where parents just think that's conversation. Well, it's not. It's instilling doubt in your child. So this could be watching mom and dad yelling and screaming at each other. It could have been them yelling at you. It could
Mm-hmm.
have been these slight messages, never hearing the words, I love you, never hearing compliments or I'm proud of you. Great job, kiddo. Those messages that mean so much to a child. If they don't get them on a regular basis, it can really hurt their self esteem.
Okay.
Okay, so that's number two. Number three is emotional abuse and neglect. Number four is physical abuse, rape, or molestation. Now, those could have happened inside and out or outside of the home. Any of these things could have. Some people might have had ideal situations in the house, but once they went to school, they might have been bullied and beat up every day,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's a whole childhood experience we're talking about.
I see.
Okay. Yes. The next one is very important. That's abandonment. And there's two types I describe, fault and no fault abandonment. Now, a no fault abandonment would be like if a parent happened to die early. It's not their fault, but it really leaves emptiness within inside that child. If they go off to war for their country, working in the elementary school was a time of the Afghanistan war. And I'll tell you, there were so many kids just checked out, like
Yeah.
almost blank on their faces. They were so worried that mom or dad would come home alive. They were worried every moment of every day. And when their anxiety is up,
Mm-hmm.
cortisol is up, and memory and learning is down. So,
Mm-hmm.
so many kids going through various traumas were identified ADHD, and they really were not. They
Interesting.
were going through trauma. Another type of no fault abandonment is if your parent supports the family by being away from home a lot. They travel a lot.
Gotcha.
And that was one of mine. I remember asking, when's dad coming home? And we find out many years later, he was FBI and CIA. And
Interesting.
he couldn't
That's
tell the
crazy.
family where he
Yeah.
was. My
That's
mom didn't
wild.
even know. So I remember that one. Okay, so fault abandonment would be the parent was never involved in the child's life. They were involved while the couple was together or married, and then they barely see them if the couple broke up. And then third, there's even a part like emotional abandonment when the father or mother is still involved with the child. So in
Mm-hmm.
other words, they're just not active in the home. They come home from work, they eat dinner, they sit in front of the TV, they barely talk to the kid. They don't go to the
Yeah.
kids' events, not the sport events, the art events, none of that. So they're
Yeah.
not emotionally involved or connected. That is a form of fault, emotional abandonment. Okay. All right, the next one would be if you were a part of the foster care system, adopted, or needed to go live in other people's homes because your
Mm-hmm.
parents lost their house or they had too many kids or they couldn't take care of you there. That even means going to grandma's house or an aunt and uncle's house. It's still you were removed from your parents. Trauma number 7 is one that most people can identify with, and that one is personal trauma. So that's if you were bullied, if you remember feeling different as a child. So you could have been a chubby, overweight child and teased at school, or skinny and gawking, called the nerd. You might have been a teen trying to come out as gay or lesbian, teased for that because you just looked different or acted different. You might have been the only African-American teenager in an all-Caucasian school, therefore never feeling like you fit in. So many people can identify with this part of personal trauma.
Yeah,
That's
I
a
don't
big
know
one.
anybody that escapes their childhood without that piece.
Yeah, let's see. So the next one is sibling trauma. So this is if your sibling bullied you, if they were born maybe with a medical issue, so they needed more of mom's and dad's time, or most oftenly, they were perceived as the golden child. So the favored one of mom or dad. So they might have been the star athlete, more handsome, more beautiful, the better student. You know those sayings, why can't you be as good in school as your brother is? Always compared to the other child. So that makes it difficult. And then trauma number 9 has 2 parts. One of the other traumas beyond 10, since I'm a baby boomer, I was growing up, this one was barely present in my life, which was community trauma. And now, since year 2000, we've got mass shootings, school shootings, more severe Mother Earth events like mudslides, fires, floods, hurricanes, snowstorms that are impacting, communities in a huge way. And now look at our world. We have COVID. So anyone that says they've never experienced trauma or have no kids that are experiencing trauma, there's one of your 3 right there. That is a global pandemic that's impacting all of us, right? So these community-based traumas seem to be getting more and more prevalent. And then part 2 of 9 is family trauma. So of course, if you're impacted in the community, your family's often impacted as well. So if you lose your job due to COVID, now you can't pay the bills for the home, and you might lose your house. Family trauma also not related to community would be if a parent was incarcerated, if you grew up in poverty or in a dangerous neighborhood, you remember feeling anxious. If you're a military family, here in the U.S., our military families move every 2 to 4 years, thus placing, kids in new schools every couple of years. And just remember that there's a lot of lack messages. So if you hear we can't pay the bills, or we may not have money to keep the house, and you grow up hearing these lack messages, you may become an entrepreneur that once your own business goes so far, and then you're scared to death to make an investment in yourself to go further. Because you have those messages, or verbal, the trauma number 2, there's verbal messages. You'll never make it. You won't amount to anything, right? So these are all so subtle, but working together forms the adult personality. So we have to break all these messages. And then trauma number 10 is if there was mental health in mom and dad, mental health issues. The 2 most difficult for children to navigate is bipolar and borderline. So borderline personality would be fast trigger anger, extreme moodiness. When they're good, they're really great, but when they're bad, they're horrid, and you don't know what you're going to get. They have really fast anger at things that nobody else would get mad at. Right? So that leaves a kid always walking on eggshells. And then bipolar is manic depressive. So that depression can show up as either just extreme fatigue, checking out emotionally, or even anger. And a manic phase could be a gambling spree, an eating binge, a spending spree, which can impact the whole family. Because if the family's struggling financially, but someone has a spending addiction, it's hurting the whole family even more so. It's just a temporary fix, right? Like any addiction. So those are the top 10. So how many do you have?